Okay, so here we go with another question on kinematics. So the question is in front of us. A cyclist travels along a straight horizontal road as shown in figure 1.1. Part A, describe how the average speed of the cyclist can be measured. In your account, suggest what equipment is used, the measurements that are made, and how the average speed is calculated. So before we do anything, the first thing we need to do is figure out what average speed is. So what's the formula for average speed? The formula for average speed is total distance over total time. That's the formula we have for average speed. Now to find the average speed, we need to find two things: the total time it takes for the cyclist to travel a total distance. So let's mark these at this as the starting point and this as the ending point. We need to know the time the cyclist takes to go from the point S, which is the starting point, to point E, which is the ending point. We need to know the distance, and we also know the time. Also need to know the time. How would we find the distance? Simply, can we use meter rule? No, we can't use meter rule because meter rules are only a meter or at max 1.5 or 2 meters long. So we can't use them. We can't use micrometers, we can't use vernier calipers, we can't use scales. What we can use is one of the apparatus, and this is where your knowledge of measurements comes into place. What we can do is, so obviously if I look at the track, so I can tell by just observation that it might be several meters long. So what do we do for that? The optimal apparatus for several meters to measure a distance which is several meters long is a measuring tape. Measuring tape. So that's what we use. We use a measuring tape to find the distance. The next thing we do is we need to find the time. How do we find the time? For time we have stopwatches. So that's the other apparatus we need to use. Now all you need to do in this 3-mark question is explain how using these two apparatus, these two equipment, you're going to find the average speed. So we need the measuring tape to find the total distance traveled by the object or the cyclist, then stopwatch to find how much time it takes for the person to go from the initial point to the end point, for the cyclist to cover this total distance. We get the total time, and then we know that average speed, since it's equal to total distance over total time, we divide the distance by the time, and we get the average speed. So this is how just simply we do this. For part of the journey, the cyclist has a constant negative acceleration. Said what is meant by negative acceleration. Okay, so we just need to explain them what means by a negative acceleration. So the thing is, when acceleration, what is acceleration? Acceleration is the rate of change of velocity, or change in velocity over change in time. Now time can never be negative. So if this is the formula for acceleration over delta t, or v2 minus v1 over t2 minus t1. So obviously time cannot be negative, like the final time would always be greater than the initial time because time always increases. So the only way we could get a negative value for acceleration, or acceleration is like, first let's discuss acceleration a bit. Acceleration is the rate of change of velocity, so change in velocity over change in time. So the only way now that acceleration could be negative is if v2 minus v1 is negative, and for v2 minus v1 to be negative, my v2 should be smaller than v1, because obviously like 5 minus 10 would give me negative 5. So you see, if I subtract the bigger number from a smaller number, so I subtract 10 from 5, then I get a negative answer. So v1 should be greater than v2 for there to be a negative value. What this means is that my initial velocity was greater than the final velocity. This tells me that the object's velocity decreased with time. The time was moving and the initial velocity was greater, the final velocity was less, meaning that the velocity was decreasing. So this is when we get negative acceleration. Negative acceleration would be when the velocity of an object decreases. This is negative acceleration, and we have a special word for this and that is deceleration or retardation. So both refer to the same thing, that is when an object slows down. So if you're moving in your car and you apply the brakes, the car slows down, and when the speed of the car reduces, the car is said to be decelerating. Okay, so the next question, the size of acceleration is 1.8 meter per second square. Calculate the change in speed of the cyclist in a time of 2.5 seconds. A very simple question, we just need to know the formula. Acceleration equals v minus u over t, where v is the final velocity, u is the initial, and t is the time. Before I was using delta v to make the point, but this is the formula, v minus u over t, that we're supposed to use. We know that acceleration is 1.8 and 1.8 is equal to dash over 2.5. What do we need to find in the question? V minus u. V minus u would give me the change in speed, or v minus u. So if I now solve this further, I would simply get 1.8 times 2.5 equals v minus u, and this would be equal to 4.5 equals v minus u. So this is my answer which I get. And what is v minus u? V minus u tells me the change in velocity of the object. So they're asking me the change in speed or change in velocity. So this v minus u, or as I had written above, so that was delta v. So I just simply found delta v, change in velocity, and that came out as 4.5. Now when writing the answers, don't forget it should be in 3 significant figures or at least 2, and along with the symbols, along with the units. If you forget the units, you lose the mark. So 4.5 meter per second. So that's how we do this. I hope this is clear to everyone. In case you have any questions, feel free to ask them.